Well, Garth, it's good to be here. And just before we get going, I just want to take opportunity for a moment just to introduce ourselves, in a sense, to this webcast. It's a webcast surrounding the finances of the Baptist Union. And it's myself, Colin Diesel, who as the financial or the national administrator, I'm responsible for those finances directly and operationally. And then Garth Coppin. And it's nice to have you, Garth, in this webcast.
Pleasure.
And you are the chairman of the Finance Board and Committee of the Baptist Union.
Correct.
And so you certainly are giving the keen and good oversight over the finances. And so welcome. And as we talk about this today, we're not going to go and drill down into details, but we're going to give an overview of the financial standing of the Baptist Union at the moment and where the touch points are, the key issues are. So I think without further ado, Garth, we're going to get into this, and let's tell folk where we are as a Baptist Union financially.
Okay, so we will deal with the finances of the Baptist Union, and we will start off with the financial statements. And we're going to be looking at the 2021 financial statements as a start. And so the way I thought I'd just like to start it is to look at the boxes, what I call the income and expenses boxes. So we will see on the slide we've got an income block appearing, and then we've got an expenses block. So that is what the budget was for last year. Now I'm going to put them on a scale and we'll see which is heavier. And we see that the income is heavier than the expenses, which means we were expecting a surplus for the year. Now we see those boxes grow in size because that shows what the budget was and then what the actual was. So we can see that on the income side that the income was quite a bit more than what was budgeted for. And the main reason for that was a bequest that was received in excess of 1 million rand. And in addition to that, the membership fees and the giving from churches was fortunately higher than budgeted. On the expenses side, we also see that the expenses were higher than budgeted for. And the main reasons for that were that the campsite, as it was COVID, couldn't bear all the cost, and so the Baptist Union has had to bear portion of those expenses. Also, towards the end of last year, there were additions to the staff, Colin, yourself, so that is one of the reasons why the employment costs are higher than were budgeted for. And in addition, the cost relating to the President and the National Executive Council was higher than budgeted for. But if we look on an overall basis, the Baptist Union finances are fortunately continue to improve. And we can see that the actual surplus was quite a bit more than the budgeted surplus. But just one thing there, it would have been better if the surplus was less, if we had had a national ministry leader. So the fact that we haven't had a national ministry leader has obviously impacted on the financial situation. And as a result of that surplus, the cash balances have gone up to now being over 2 million rand at the end of last year. And also some of the loan to the trust funds was also repaid as well. And so one of the important considerations is the Baptist Union a going concern. I think the current financial statements show that it is a going concern going forward. Colin, is there any comments you would like to make on those financial statements?
Thank you, Garth. And I think that's you've hit the nail on the head very, very, very easily and very quickly. I'd just like to mention one thing. And that is, when I came into this position, there was a lot of concern about the loans, the loan accounts in the Baptist Union.
Yes, there were.
And we've really made a major impact in paying back those loans over the last couple of years. And even in the midst of COVID, we've managed to reduce those loans quite substantially from, when I took over, it was about 750,000, and it's now down to 434,000. So there's a substantial decrease in what the BU owed the trust funds in the loan accounts, and also what had been borrowed from the missionaries' accounts has been paid. It's been reduced as well from 150,000 to 50,000, and hopefully we will clear that debt in the year ahead. So just to let the churches know, Garth, that we have made a concerted effort based on what they asked us to do at 2019 to reduce the loan balances of the Baptist Union.
Okay, one of the other major changes that we are going to see this year is that in the past there were separate financial statements for the Baptist Union and the trust funds. This year, for the first time, we've combined those financial statements. Now, why have we combined them? Well, both of those use the same non-profit number. And so, being a non-profit organization, they need to submit a tax return every year. And seeing they've got the same number, we now are required to combine those financial statements. And so that means that the balances and transactions between the Baptist Union and the trust funds are now eliminated. Colin, you've just mentioned that the Baptist Union owes the trust funds amount. When you combine them, those ones get eliminated. So in those combined financial statements, you don't have those loans at all. And I think that is an important consideration for the hearers to be aware of.
That's right.
Colin, do you now just want to give us a bit of an update as to what the finances are doing as far as 2022 is concerned?
I think what is encouraging is we're going to end with another surplus this year, Garth, and a fairly healthy surplus, not as good as perhaps the last few years, but it's still a surplus. And at the moment, one of the big things that went out this year was the 750 Rand that went to pastors for their pastoral fee, and that has obviously boosted some of the income. But that's going to be used in years to come. It's not an extra income for the Baptist Union. It's going to be used for purposes. But at the moment, we are sitting in a fairly healthy financial situation. But bearing in mind, there is an NML that will come on, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So I think we'll leave that to a later discussion further down here, Garth. Thank you.
Okay, Colin, one of the other items that's going to be dealt with at the Assembly is the budget for next year. You've been heavily involved in that. Do you want to just give us a bit of an overview on that?
Yeah, the budget is a substantially higher one. We're going to ask the churches this year for an increase in membership fees, which will be a 10 Rand increase. And I think perhaps the churches watching need to understand why we are doing this. It's not that the Baptist Union will gain anything out of it. We're going to move it from 60 Rand per member in each church to 70 Rand. That's what we're going to ask the churches to vote on and accept. That extra 10 Rand will be going to the missions department. The missions department's budget is incorporated into the Baptist Union's department so that they have income, so they could also employ people that they need to employ to make sure that missions ministry functions properly going forward. I'm excited. I think there's a good future for the missions department. It's coming from a mission meeting in the last couple of days, and things are looking good and positive. We're getting back into what we should be doing in terms of evangelization and missions, etc. But that 10 Rand will boost the budget, close to another 200,000. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the 750 Rand per pastoral fee also will boost the income. Though they're not funds that we can touch as a Baptist Union, but it's going to certainly lift up the liquidity of the Baptist Union with those until they are used. I must also mention two things that we need to highlight. At this assembly, there's going to be an emotive discussion around the sale of the campsite.
Yes, I can understand.
Mr. Dave Temple and I have been involved for the last year or so quite heavily in the negotiations around the sale of the campsite. And people are often asking, why are we selling this campsite? And Garth, I think you had the figures. How much was written off last year in terms of campsite costs that we had to bear as a union?
Yes, there was quite a bit that was incurred, and at the end, about 360,000 Rand was expensed because it couldn't be recovered. And there was something similar in the previous year. So that is obviously a concern, but that's the reality.
That's right. And it was based on those figures that we went to the Assembly last year and said, can we investigate the possibility of selling the campsite? Now, I know at the moment that's going to impact on our budget.
Yes.
If we don't sell, we have to carry those costs again. If we do sell, it gives us a lot of liquidity going forward. But the fact is, the churches need to make a decision. If they don't sell, who's going to contribute to that campsite to keep it a going concern? Because we as a Baptist Union cannot in perpetuity continue to write off those types of funds. So that's one thing we need to remember as we come to this assembly. The other one is, of course, a very important one, is the employment of a national ministry leader, which has been delayed slightly through COVID, etc. But we're getting to that point now where, in all likelihood, in 2023, we will have a national ministry leader in place. And that's going to be a costly exercise. It's a major salary to pay, plus all other costs that surround his ministry as he ministers to churches. We have put aside just short of 400,000 over the last few years as a buffer fund for that. But we're going to have to ask churches to really come to the party and support that ministry leader and increase their voluntary giving towards that ministry leader, that we don't only rely on buffer funds, that you must be seen as a pastor of a church in a sense, and you need to support the pastor of the church. So those are two major items coming onto the budget next year that need to be dealt with, and they will be dealt with at this assembly largely, Garth. I think, I don't know if you've got any other comments on the budget. You did a good job in bringing the budget together this year as well. So I don't know if you've got anything you would like to add to that, Garth.
I think if we look on the finances for 2020 and 2021, we showed a healthy surplus, but those surpluses were largely as a result of once-off items. So once those once-off items fall away, the finances on an ongoing basis are not likely to be as favorable. And as you say, but with a national ministry leader coming on, that will be extra costs. So it will be for the churches to realize this and come forward and support the Baptist Union going forward.
Right. And so, yes, I think we also need to look at, we've run very lean on staff the last couple of years as a Baptist office, and it has impacted the way we can service churches and serve our churches. And so there's going to be, over and above the national ministry leader, 1 or 2 clerks that have to be brought in, so that we offer a service that is speedy and also accurate and efficient to our churches. So, yeah, I think you're quite right. We're going to have to look at the churches coming on board, and we're going to ask, appeal to them.
Yes.
That if you want the BU to do what it's called to do as an administrative office, we need help. Yeah. Thank you. I think we've covered the key aspects. I don't think there's anything else, Garth, if you're happy.
No, I think we've covered the main points.
And I'd just like to remind folk that the assembly is from the 26th of September to the 29th of September. And the first day of the assembly will be around pastoral support. It's the pre-assembly day. And then the actual assembly business gets going from the 27th to the 29th. And if I recall correctly, on the second day, which is the Wednesdays when the finances are coming up. And that's, if you want to ask any questions around that, I think we are open for any emails to come through to the national office or phone calls, and we can answer any queries that perhaps arise out of this webcast today.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And blessings to you all, and we'll certainly see you at the assembly if all goes well. Thank you. Thank you, Garth.
Okay, pleasure.